I'm gonna. Let's see. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Capital Program Committee. It is Thursday, April 18th, and it's about 3:05 p.m. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So.
Second. Yeah, we don't need seconds. We're an informal committee. Thank you though, Barry. On your motion, PJ?
Aye.
Barry?
Aye.
Brooke? Aye. Howard?
Aye.
Jill?
Hi.
And I'm an aye. Is there anyone else on with us, Sue? I don't see anyone else.
Hi, Jill. That's.
Sweet. Okay. This meeting is being audio video recorded, will be broadcast on the town's YouTube channel. Please don't say or share anything you don't want displayed. This meeting is being conducted in hybrid fashion. If we take any votes, we will do them via roll call. We'll dispense with the other two-page list of comments and move forward with today's topic, which is enhancements to Plum, which is our capital database software program. And since I'm currently note taker, if you need something, wave your hand, please. Let's see. Last week I did get a copy of Howard's items and suggestions, and I think those were well received, and there were a variety of those that were thoughts other members had reached out to me just to say yes. And I had a short list. I am unable to get onto my mail server from here for some reason, which I can work out with IT after the fact for future meetings. But I cannot access the master list. So what I'm thinking we will do is I'm just trying to think how I want to handle this. Probably the easiest way is Howard. If you were to go through, well, first of all, Brooke is here with us, so I'd like to see if she has any comments she would like to add. I can jot those down to be added to the master list, and then I think what we would probably do is take a look at the Rory form online. And we can kind of go through that and see how far we get. Brooke, did you have anything at this point that you wanted to add to potential
Nope.
enhancements? Okay, so Nantucket Capital Program.
What is the URL? I forget what it is, Steve.
Not what I'm thinking. Sue, can you tell me what the Plum URL is?
NantucketCapitalRequest.org.
Yeah.
/Rory.
/open. And how do we, Sue, can you maybe pause the recording while I put in my particulars?
Yep, gonna do it right now.
Take your time. There you go.
Could you repeat I have NantucketCapitalProjects.org, then what? Rory?
NantucketCapitalRequest.org.
Oh, singular.
Yeah, then log in and you can go to the Rory from there.
Not project request.
Capital request.
NantucketCapitalRequest.org.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, well, one of the low hanging fruit, and I think we'll just run through it here. PJ, you might have mentioned it, was the idea of on the introduction page, there would be a field either within a grouping or on its own that had what the actual request amount was.
Yeah, a standalone field as opposed to, hopefully it being in the project summary, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end, sometimes it's, a very large project summary that you sift through. I mean, you're gonna go through it anyways, but yeah, if it's excluded from there, it can cause issues.
And then on that topic, obviously the introduction, are we looking on having this on other pages? I mean, it's a simple database modification. no, relatively simple. It's just a matter of getting into these webpage, the template that shows us this information.
The request total,
Yeah,
it seems like it would be relevant to cost and funding if it was,
cost
They-
and. So cost and funding gives us the breakdown. I'm just
the
gonna,
breakdown. Sometimes I feel like it doesn't marry up to the actual request amount though, which again has me sometimes scrambling
Right.
between trying to find out what the request is and what it's included as in the cost and funding.
okay, so I think that's a good point. And I think what I'm gonna suggest is that we would ask that on any page that doesn't have cost, that will be reflected in the field. And the other thing that would be reflected in the field is the alphanumeric code for the request.
When you say
good
cost, you
idea.
mean request amount?
Yeah,
Yeah, gotcha.
sorry, I'm
No, yeah.
in a different budgeting
Just
mode.
thinking Cost and funding is a.
Yeah, I gotta get into municipal finance vocabulary. But yes, correct, the requested amount of funding. So, what do we think about also including the alphanumeric?
Love
So,
it.
pardon me?
Love it.
Okay, so any concerns about that?
From a ease of use perspective, I mean, so could those just be static fields at the heading
Yeah.
of each
Yeah.
subpage essentially? I mean,
Well, so the way it's set up is this isn't in frames, so each
Okay.
page is a new page, so see how it changes, maintain network
Yeah.
infrastructure, introduction, classification.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna suggest to them through, what I'm gonna suggest through finance department to Plum is that it would be at the head of the page because it is headline information. If they did frames, they would just be able to put it in there and it would never change, but it's
Right.
again, relatively simple. Okay, so go ahead. Anyone? Any concerns about that? I'm hoping we can start with a small success, a small win, and then we can multiply from there. Okay, so that's one and done, at least with respect to our suggestion for an enhancement.
Yeah.
Now, the perhaps larger one, were there any other in terms of data fields to be shown on the Rory?
I mean, I know we touched in a couple different ways on whether or not something is part of, a chain of phased funding. Or has prior, requests that are, let's just say associated with it, prior year's requests, so
Yeah.
if that falls under this category, I think that was touched on.
No.
No.
Yes, we did. No, not this category.
Okay.
So that I would suggest we put under coding. And that will involve a discussion with finance department. I was gonna meet with Brian this week and both our schedules aren't aligning, so. We've had some pretty in-depth conversations on the convention that would be used so that it would make sense for how we review and process information.
Yeah.
But certainly as important, if not more important, how finance department would want to process it. And I think we were pretty much in alignment on it. I don't know if it's still up on his whiteboard from 4 years ago, but we'll touch on that one there.
So there's two things.
Go
There
ahead.
is this part of a serial request that it's over multiple years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many times has this request come and not been authorized? In other words, like the building at the fire department. Like, it would be interesting to me, how many times has somebody tried to do the same thing?
So what I'd suggest on that is not under coding, because the coding is gonna get quickly difficult for everyone to understand without having a key that they refer to all the time, because they're not using it every day.
Yeah.
So coding would be more like, as we have it now, the year, the department. Then we would add, if it was a phased, whether perhaps it would be, dot P1 or hyphen P1. If it was phase 2, it would be, let's go with dot on the alphanumeric code, there would be an appendage and it would be P1. If it was a supplemental, the same type of thing. So you could actually just quickly look at the request, know the department and know that this was a phase 1. It might be phase 2, so it's P2. dot sub S3, so it's, oh, this is phase 2 supplemental request 3. That's again why I'd want to get into with Brian, but to providing the information you're asking for, I think that could be in a field in the details portion of the request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is,
Sorry.
it is, let's see. Specification.
Can
No,
you-
there's one, wait, one second, I just want to see, there was one. Well, I think we'd want to find which, we could probably just do it in the introduction. And an introduction would include. So right now, currently, what this follows largely is the SIP request form. So we took the SIP request form, which was the Excel spreadsheet, and it was for department heads to fill in, and then we converted that over into the database web pages, so you could click through and get them in a segmented format. If you want to look at, if you're ever interested in looking at it as the SIP request format, gussied up a little bit, looks pretty. This is what the SIP request in the spreadsheet looks like,
Oh, really?
or the paper version. So you get all the information here,
I didn't know that.
and then
Neither
still.
did I.
So one of the benefits of this, sorry, I'm keep going because I know we got a little bit of time. One of the benefits of working this way is, so say you're, I don't know if this is helpful for you guys or not, but say you've got to review these 3 requests.
Yeah.
So I keep I can search here and I can say fire. Oops. I don't need to number lock. I can sort for fire.
Yeah.
And I'll have my 20, when we're finished with this process we're undergoing now, the only request that will come up will be current year requests. Or we can set it up so you can select only current year requests. And then what I typically do here is I go to print view. Print view. And then I go back.
Is it possible to share that screen with the rest of us?
Oh, you don't see it?
No, you have to share.
Oh, yeah, that's screen, yeah.
Go back to the Zoom window.
Okay, one sec. I opened one too many.
Yeah.
Okay. This one. I'll do it.
There it is.
Yeah, you just had it.
Screen share.
There you go.
Got it now?
Yes, thank you.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So what I was saying, and actually, I don't know if this is good use of our time. We could actually do a half hour
Training,
training and it would probably be a good use of time. And,
sharing tips and tricks.
yeah, and I guess the thing I wanted to share on this particular item is that if you're doing your Rory on, well, let's leave it till then.
Yeah.
Let's leave it till then.
Agreed.
So let's leave up one request. Which we decided was gonna be the network. Okay, so just to give this visual context, folks at home, the idea is we're gonna have the alphanumeric code and the funding request amount added to somewhere in the top of each of these pages. So when you click through, you see them. The other item we're gonna add is somewhere here, whether, well, actually, you know what? Bear with me a second. Instant funding. We're gonna find the place that makes sense to put whether this is a phased request, a supplemental request, and
A recurring request, like.
recurring request,
Network infrastructure is roadway improvements.
Yeah.
Cobblestone improvements.
recurring, and actually, we probably could do that in the alphanumeric, because it's gonna be simpler. And what Brooke had brought up was the idea of also, was, I think, part and parcel. Has this come before us before, and if so, how frequently? prior request.
Could that be implemented as a drop-down box initially so that it's not a free floating alphanumeric field?
No, and I'll get to that in just one second.
Yeah.
Maybe in the selection phase, but not in the report viewing phase, because we actually don't want to be modifying any of that.
Right, no, I agree, but what I'm saying to you is that people left to their own devices at times will call things certain things or
Right.
Oh,
this type.
oh,
So
you're
the
talking
more-
about with the department head.
Where
Right,
they
with the
enter.
department heads, so that they're locked into a certain series of categories, that's it, nothing more, nothing
So-
less, no.
Yes, so what'll happen there is, that's part of the database integrity design elements. And
Okay.
that will be a field that is actually auto-generated. And or supplemented by finance department when we get to the
okay.
phase.
All right,
So that department heads aren't, it's like, I mean, a more simpler is people put in last names instead of the first name, or they don't put the first name in, or they don't capitalize it, or, so, yeah, that is definitely gonna happen, but these guys are super duper pros.
okay.
I just wanted to, there is on the priority phase, is it correct? Yeah, phase funding, was it included in the prior year budget, scheduled replacement? So we could add, I think, under priority. The elements that Brooke had mentioned.
Yeah, just,
Okay, just trying
but
to,
it's like, how many times have you tried and failed?
yeah. Which technically doesn't enhance the priority level.
Well, it's interesting to me, well, and there's two ways of failure. We don't recommend it,
Yeah,
Right,
or we do and town meeting votes it down.
yeah, and
Right.
again, I'm not
Or
saying,
town admin pulls it,
Yeah,
which we also see.
Yeah.
so maybe it's too complicated.
no, I'm not suggesting
try to
it's not
do it.
useful information. It just with respect to the strict usefulness of the Rory. Our priorities are the priorities we grade on are the criteria, and those. Don't reflect any value for if it was a prior request. It was just an idle comment, but
Yeah,
it would be interesting to have,
have you requested this item before?
yeah.
And yes, no, could be.
And result of vote at town
That even
meeting.
can be confusing.
Result
yeah.
of votes.
Right.
Or maybe we just ask them to include it in the narrative.
Yeah, that's where it gets into databases, because we never know what's in there. Some people put it in, some people don't.
And is it important to know?
I don't know. Well, what I'm trying to do at this point is ones we can take off the table, enhancements we can resolve and take off the table, we do as we go. And then items that are, have questionable value or have, timeline impact on implementation with the database company and so on and so forth. We're gonna address, those will be categorized and those will be addressed somewhat separately. Okay, we did introduction. Howard, do you have any that affect the layout? As I said, I don't have the list in front of me.
Right.
Do you have,
Kind of, but they fall more in the descriptive box rather than like a footer. Like, for instance, I suggested a consolidated rolling stock schedule. Now, I don't know where that would show up. That's not, I think, consistent with what you're asking.
yeah, I think that would show up as a separate report. The idea would be that the SIP request form is modified to the extent that a date of useful life and a date of intended replacement and a date of acquisition, just to name three, would be inserted by the department head in a pre-established form for rolling stock. And they could include, if we felt it was necessary, the value for at initial purchase and the estimated value at for replacement, and it could then be that whatever information we decide using those as examples would then feed a report that address rolling stock on perhaps a department by department level, something along those lines. So,
I agree. It's not what you asked for.
Okay.
I had also wondered whether, where it would be useful to determine or identify whether the cost is going to come from enterprise operation carry forwards,
Yeah.
from year to year. Whether there were, and again, in that same thing, could it be an installment rather than and done in pieces rather than done in the full amount? So your categories were, let me get over there, were, I wrote down, new recurring phase, scheduled, supplemental, prior requested, and I would say also whether it could be incremental.
Incremental.
Yeah.
So that, just for my understanding, we've kind of shifted from the nature of the request to the source of funding.
No, I'm asking, it's not the source of funding, it's what does it look like? Is it new? Was it requested before? Is this an ongoing amount that's annually requested? Can it be phased or scheduled? Or is it
I got you.
supplemental to a previous request?
I got you.
Okay.
So we're not talking about the nature of the request itself. We're talking about the nature of funding.
Could this be
What kind of request is it?
divided up over multiple fiscal
Yeah.
years?
Okay.
So the topic sentence is, what kind of a request is it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through where we put it. So, phase. So, okay, let me give you an example. I think what I'm understanding is Howard is saying, is this a project that can be funded in phases? And what we were talking about earlier, Howard, or at least I was, based on my past experience, is this request phase 2 of an existing project? So that's why I'm saying one is talking about the nature of funding, which is what you're talking about. And what we were previously talking was about the nature of the request itself. It is itself a phased project, as opposed to it is a project that we feel can be funded in phases. But I understand what you're saying. And so phases.
Yeah, Stephen, I'm indifferent to whether there were previous phases of it that were funded. I'm really concerned about this request. And is it new, or is it, and therefore what is it? Is it new recurring? Is it new to be scheduled? Is it new because it's supplemental to a previous request? I don't think you need to know any more about the previous request, whether the previous phase. That's in the description of the project.
So we kind of already talked about some of this, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps in the project naming convention.
I think that's right.
And I think what you're getting at is something that came up in the conversation, which was, this is an awfully big request. Are they going to be able to execute it all in the coming fiscal year, or should we divide the funding over 2? And that's to some extent a procurement question, right? You can't procure a project can it be procured in phases? Because the problem is you can't sign a contract, even if it's going to be executed in 2 fiscal years, unless the funding's approved, right? So,
Right, but there are 2 answers to that, Brooke. One is that you could approve it, but just commit to approve X amount of it this year and commit to do the other part next year when you need it, because it's not contradicting the contract letting requirements in the municipal law for having funding available. That's the first.
So this is going to be one of those ones that we want to talk about later, because it gets into, I'm not suggesting it's not a worthwhile topic. In fact, it's why I'm suggesting we need to be able to have a little bit deeper, broader conversation, because this involves different members' philosophies on and perhaps finance and town admins and town managers' philosophy on not only, this is like contract management to some extent. This is about vendor management, consistency of the same vendor, locking them in on a contract. in advance versus later, or the benefits of maybe not having been locked in. So it's a
Yeah.
topic that deserves some exploration, and it's not something I think we're gonna be able to say, oh, yeah. I think in terms of if we, certainly a department head can be putting in to the summary description that they would like to have this be phased, or maybe they don't want it to be phased, but it could be. Like, we can make that simple determination whether we feel that's useful. But we're kind of digging a little deeper, which I have no concern with. I think it's well within our purview in terms of discussion points and potential recommendations, but we can't do that here and now.
So Stephen, your topic right now is coding, like how do you want these to be identified? And to me, along with the amount and the code, I think you need to know, what is it, a new request? Is it a recurring request? Is it a phased?
Right.
Is it supplemental funding?
Right.
Yeah, and so we have the new, I mean, just to cover, yes, we have down for phase, we have down for supplemental, we have down for recurring. And a new request is always going to be determined that the alphanumeric is the current year and there's no appendages. So there's no phase or supplemental additional alphanumeric coding. So you know right away if this, on this particular request, highlighted fire, if it said fire 25, we know that's a brand new request.
Correct.
The coding will pick up phasing and supplemental and recurring.
Right.
And perhaps all three of them. Okay, so we're all, on the same- go ahead,
I
I'm
have
sorry.
recurring, phased, scheduled, supplemental. 5-4.
Okay. I'd like to explore scheduled a little bit. The reason is that gets into a discussion about what does scheduled mean?
Correct.
Is it scheduled at the department level? Is it scheduled through the 10-year SIP? Is it scheduled in terms of if you're in rolling stock or other capital asset management, a scheduled replacement has a specific meaning. So scheduled brings up a slightly different angle to it that I think we'd want to have a better handle on ourselves and with finance before we add it to the list. So what I'm gonna,
Agreed. I was thinking what you said, the end of what you said, which is,
Okay.
is it written down in the schedule? And now we're being asked to fund something that was in a schedule that we knew about before, but it wasn't required in that year.
right, and then the question becomes why we need to
Good
discuss
point.
it more. It's like, is it scheduled in a select board strategic plan? Is it scheduled in Concom or coastal? Like, what does that really, what
I
does
agree.
that mean? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would suggest to keep in mind is the coding for me, and I could be wrong, it certainly won't be the first time or the last, is how to grasp a general nature of the request that doesn't deal with its prioritization. It's identifying the nature of the request. This is a new request. This is a phased request. This is a
Right.
supplemental request. This is a recurring request.
Agreed.
Scheduled, I'm a little concerned about because scheduled borderlines into our prioritization weighting. And then it also is a little bit of a concern because I'm not sure where we stop adding to the alphanumeric code. So I'm just throwing those out there. I'm not shooting it down. I put a little annotation for us to talk about that under coding. Is that okay with you, Howard, in the future?
Yeah, I believe we all are agreeing that,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. All right, do you have any others on coding?
I do not, if you're asking me.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone have any other information that sorry, this is small, but I can't see it all. How do I get rid of this? It used to be so good.
I mean, just with regards to the alphanumeric code, and I know we brought this up quite a bit before, but some kind of consistency between the middle number, which I think identifies a year,
Yeah.
and what that relates to in relation to active requests, because for instance, maintain network infrastructure is a 2017 request. It's still coded as admin 17. Obviously, that's because I'm guessing since 2017, it's been a recurring request. So that one is kind of obvious, albeit still a little confusing when you look at it. But I think there's other ones, whether they're, I think you guys say some are cloned from previous years where it was the same request as a prior year. It's in this year's active requests with last year's, year in the alphanumeric request. So I feel like that comes up every year, just some kind of consistency to that naming process.
Peter, if you look at what's up on the screen right now, like you look at the fire station,
Yeah,
would you, based on what you just said, wouldn't you want to change those numbers to reflect that it's 25, not 22 anymore?
I mean, if they're all 2025 requests, then yes, definitely, would be
Yeah.
the simple answer, but I don't know if it's that simple.
Yeah, Sue's got something important to say. I
Yeah.
can sense it.
Yeah, bet.
Things regarding the coding, especially to the.
No, you didn't.
Oh, Sue, it's hard to hear you.
Might need to come closer to the mic.
That's wicked. That was a mouth. A couple things with the coding, in regard to the one you were just talking about on the fire station. When that project is first put in, it was put in 2022.
So there's.
We
Brooks.
not change that code. That has to be done by the software developer.
Right.
It's hard coded once it's in. In regard to the ones that would say, like it's fire 17 or something that Peter had just referenced. Those are the cloned ones. When a project is cloned, it maintains the project code number. And I do agree with you, Peter, that does get confusing to know, is it cloned? Is it, what year is it? So I do think some clarification could happen there.
And I will also say if it was written there from 2023 and it was cloned for 2025, it might be a totally different request as it's evolved over time.
Most of the clones, Howard, and are for like the annual cobblestone improvements, sidewalk improvements. So the request is for the annual maintenance. Obviously, they'll be doing different roads and sidewalks.
I see.
Thank you, Sue. Christie?
So with that, is there some field that is more flexible for allowing you to know the requests specific for 2025, say, for example, capital committee review 25?
Yeah, and so that's actually, that is, I think, the realistic way that we'll be dealing with this, because in order to have integrity backward looking with the code, from the conversation I had with Brian, we can still address phase supplemental recurring, and if we put scheduled or others in there. But the base alphanumeric, let's say fire 2022-02, it may be one or two things, and then I'm gonna answer your questions. Just because I've done the database stuff, so I'm trying to, it may be that there's a code and the column, this column says original code. And then there's another one that there's, basically we're breaking this up by columns because that's how it's represented in the database.
Hide original code.
Yeah, and then the other thing so we could have code and then it might have phase, there'll be a column for phase, there'll be a column for scheduled, there'll be a column. The problem with that is that it doesn't, I'm just thinking through this, it doesn't reflect in the header with the alphanumeric. So really what we need to do is come up with a way that the database appends through manual entry in a new column that is the coding we want that's then reflected in the header while maintaining the backwards and compatibility and data integrity by retaining the original code.
AKA, sort of an AK, also
Yes,
known as.
yes, right.
Yeah.
And then to Christie's point, which I think is a great one, which also helps us address my Rory's, is there would be a checkbox for current year requests as opposed to, and maybe there would be one for past fiscal years. So you could just select them, you could, I think it's more important, let's keep it simple, Stephen. It would be most important to be able to select current year somewhere on the Rory, sort, so that when you come up to. Well, on this page, you'll know that. Sue, is this currently happening? Because I know that, and it may have been a function of clones, there were requests that weren't current years showing up in the My Rorys, or was that maybe on mine? Because I have different access level than the rest of the group.
Well, so I don't access it the same way that you do, Mr. Chair, but in looking at your screen over on the CRF status, because that is what would drive the projects you would want to review, you as the committee. And you see, you can if you go down one, you have an up and down arrow that you can sort those to only show something that is in capital committee review status.
Right, and because I sorted them on the year. So now is there a way?
It's filtered by CRF.
Yeah, so you can't sort fire. Capital review, can you? Yeah, you can.
We'll try it first.
Yeah, just did it. So you just type it in. There we go. Sue, you're a miracle worker. So did we see what we did there? We want fire. Type in
Has to
fire.
include all of these
Yeah,
things.
right.
Searches all fields.
We want completed. It'll sort, I think.
Type completed.
Try completed.
Yeah, it'll sort to
Yeah,
that
there you
one.
go.
Good. All right. Well, that's good.
But I think there's more than one completed.
It's good to know that.
Maybe
It's a
not
bit more
fire.
robust in terms of how it.
No, there's only one shown. Okay, good. So.
But
You just type, so budget review, that's, so you guys are seeing, I don't know if you see that on yours, that's. What I see is a little bit different.
Gotcha.
There, okay,
All right,
Yes, but
let me
the thing-
confirm that I can do that.
two things, if I may.
yeah, please.
That's great, and it's great to use the search, but I think that the screen does reset every time you come back to it, so you look it up, you look it up,
So you
but it's
missed,
not, you can't just scroll through and have it be
I'm gonna
clear.
nip you on that, just because you
Okay,
missed,
yeah,
now you're in
I
trouble.
did,
So this is.
and then I have another, just
No, that's
comment.
cool. So what, and you don't have to do this, but what I'm gonna just. Basically, you do your sort here and keep it open. Open these up in tabs. And then you can actually even do this, you can even. You can open these to printer view or whatever,
Yeah, that is a very helpful way to do it.
and then you'll
Opening
have it
tabs.
And link in the tab,
sequentially.
And it keeps your search.
Oh, I got you, okay.
So you
So
keep,
rather
I have a
than
master tab.
Replacing your
okay.
search with the thing, you right click, open in a new tab.
Yeah.
And if you
And
have,
then you can go
Because that
back
was
to your
driving me
list.
crazy,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
if you've got two monitor screens, you can pull the tab out. You open them all up and then pull it out. So you have-
Yeah.
like, there's a, but yeah,
Sounds fine with
totally
smaller.
important. Yeah,
Oh, excellent.
Chrissy's getting a new,
And the software.
set up.
Can I put in a capital request
Yeah.
for the committee?
I just have one other comment.
Yeah, please.
So, and maybe for Sue, so you said you really can't change the code. You gotta keep it the same when a request is initially made and it carries through, correct?
This code,
That code.
but we can change what we see without affecting that.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, but it would be nice to be on the same page. So I guess what I'm getting at is, so when you have a request that comes back, you basically, it's probably coming back because either it wasn't approved or some financing or data has changed on the request. So when you have a new, so the request is basically different from the one that was initially presented. Why don't you just do a new
Right.
code number that reflects the new request and the new year? Why do you have to, why can't you just do a new request
So,
for the same thing that reflects the year that?
Yeah, would
the
they
year
have
that
to
you're in?
would they have to manually input a whole new request? Is that the reason?
yeah, and I think what I want to just kind of frame
I don't
that a little bit, because Ray does this at the HTC. I say that all the details and then he summarizes it. and He sounds really
Yeah.
smart. So, I mean, you're basically saying, is it a clone or is it a new request that is very similar to its predecessor? And if it's a new request that's similar, why isn't it getting a new code? It's its own. So I think just to restate that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's one that programmatically, administratively, I want to discuss with Brian when we meet.
I think, yeah,
And then I can come back and we can have some feedback, because there may, to us, it's that simple. Right?
Well-
But to, them, it might be different. They
Yeah.
want to clone it to get the basic information in the system for the department head, so they're not having to go back through. And then the department head needs to exercise the discipline to actually update all the fields. Where we're having some problems is that the clones, some of them aren't, all the fields aren't getting updated, so it's confusing. If we. So, and that's where we get in, I want to get into discussion with Brian, because if we just use a clone to populate a field and we rename it without the data input discipline, we're gonna run into the same problem. We're gonna have stale data. And this isn't on anyone. I mean, I get,
Yeah.
this is, you know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
So
So,
your summary is excellent, but this is where the conversation starts. And yes, I agree with what you said.
I mean, thank
so
you.
help me understand cloning. Cloning is taking, I asked for this, I got it, and I'm asking for the same thing again, so I just
No.
duplicated and updated?
No, it's actually a database effort that, I mean, the end result, yes, but let me have Sue explain what the cloning is. It's a thing you do, and they're doing in the computer.
that would be helpful.
Right,
Yeah.
that's, okay, yeah. Could you explain cloning to me?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So cloning, again, I'm gonna use reference to the annual maintenance of road improvements, sidewalks, cobblestones. Those are
Okay.
the IT, maintaining the IT computers every year, or purchasing computers. Those are the projects that are cloned because they are annual requests for a pot of money to improve the roads or to buy new town computers. That is done by me. Most of the maintenance in the capital software is done by me. I'm the biggest user of this program. So I flag the items that are going to be cloned and then notify the software developers to actually do the behind the scene cloning. So when it's cloned, it carries the project number code over. And then it'll just have the dollar value will go into the new fiscal year. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, and does the
Yeah.
project code, it updates to the current fiscal year, right?
No.
No, it does not.
What is, and this is where I definitely agree with all of you on, because it is confusing to see a project code of 17-001 for 6 years straight.
Right.
I see.
The code stays the same, but you also maintain the history of the prior years. So if you had
Got
gone cost and funding page, I believe, you will see that, okay, you will see in 2017, we had $1 million for the roads. In 2018, we had 1.2 million. So it maintains the historic values with that.
Okay.
So real
Yeah.
quick, then it sounds to me like cloning would only really be appropriate for recurring, expected to be approved and historically has been approved requests that are substantially the same year to year. Okay, so that makes sense. And so if that's the only time that we would see an outdated year on an alphanumeric code, then I'd be confident that I know what I'm looking at. But I do feel like where
Yeah.
Christie started this is that then we also see either parts of phase funding projects that have cloned requests carried over, or prior requests that weren't approved for one reason or another that are cloned and carry over a prior year. And I think those are the ones that create the confusion.
Yeah, and I think just a tail end on that, I believe, my experience with this is that the cloning is used or has been used in the past to replicate the essential data. And then the issue is two-part, right? It's what we've been discussing is the alphanumeric doesn't update. And the other is data entry discipline so that the data is updated. So two perception issues, how we perceive the data of a clone. And I think we can address them both. One is, not ours to do anything about, just to recommend, which is the discipline on the data update. but the other is creating another column for coding. And it can show us different information or essential information to our work, or at least that makes our work easier, but that doesn't affect the underlying mechanics of the database or how Sue or Brian would be able to create reports, because that's a fundamental field and it's. Oops, sorry, you're gonna log off in a minute.
Yeah. So to me, it's cloning is its own thing, right? It's a recurring, we could even use clone. But there's the repeat or cloned request, and then there's like what I would call the resubmitted request. Like, that's the
Yeah.
word that I would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I think of it,
I
right?
would suggest that we come to yeah, I agree. I suggest we come to a common understanding, and to my way of thinking, cloning is a procedure that's done as a matter of database administration. It's a step within the
Okay.
database to
It's a
create
technical
something.
function.
Yeah, and then for our discussion, is it a replication? Is it an exact replication? Is it a semi? And if it's semi-replicated, like the purpose, the cost, then at what threshold does it stay a replication, or is it a new request? And the database technical cloning was done simply for the ease and efficiency of the department head
Right.
inputting data.
Right.
So that's why I think if we keep clone out of the discussion, or not, and we don't have to keep it out, but so are you comfortable with cloning is basically, we're talking about the database technical step to take a request and turn it into a replication of that request?
I'm comfortable with.
Okay, so just so because it's easier, it's nice when we know what our words mean.
So a recurring request could be cloned and a resubmitted request could be cloned
Right.
also,
Yeah,
right? So the cloning isn't, so really it's about nomenclature. How do we wanna, what do we wanna know about these?
Yeah,
And then how do we have a drop down that explains whether it's, recurring annual request?
so I think.
Resubmitted prior requests, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be a combination of solutions. Part of it's gonna be a separate alphanumeric code that we can use that tells us quite simply some essential bits. Is it a phase? Is it supplemental? Is it both? Is it recurring? It could be all three of them. And if we work scheduled in, that could be in there. That might be in the alphanumeric. It may be that instead of putting that in the alphanumeric to keep things simple for everyone, including the database people, it goes in, oh, sorry, was there a hand up?
no.
Sue at
no,
some
it's
point has
another
Yeah,
column.
we could have a column that we view. Or it could be on the individual SIP request form that's been completed in this layout. So there might be now I know we have, in the priority, we have whether it was phased, scheduled. It may be that we create a little focus box here that has this type of information in it. So there's a couple different ways to approach it, I think.
Sue had a comment.
Sue?
yeah, she does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to clarify again between clone and resubmitted. Resubmitted projects are not clones.
Okay.
They do, say it went through the capital, it was in capital. I would have to have it in front of me, capital program review status. If you approved it and then say town administration, or we decided not to bring it forward to town meeting, we would push that back a status back into finance review status. That's where it becomes resubmitted. It's not actually a cloned project.
Okay, so it's not a new, okay, that makes
And it
sense.
would carry the prior year's year on the alphanumeric.
Correct.
So that would be one where in the current year, we're reviewing something that's active and not a clone, but carrying last year's year on it.
So the code would remain the same, and then what
Yeah,
I
gotcha.
the year, the start year on the front page, that's where it would get changed.
So from a doing my Rory's point of view, it would be really helpful for me to pull up all the things that are things we do every year that are recurring, sort it by that and do all of those, because those are ones that I probably don't need to spend as much time on. And if I have a block of time, I can go through. Because the rational, I'm gonna see it year after year after year, right? And I'm
Yeah.
really just looking at what's the dollar amount this year and does that make sense? Right?
Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer, each request regardless of clone still takes full review and, it still should be reviewed as equally as a brand new request.
And
Obviously, we have history, which is good, but I do think,
a little
Like
context
for-
on that.
for example, really
Sidewalks.
quickly, the cobblestone, we're running a huge balance.
There,
The work wasn't getting done,
Right.
so they do, it's still. I know you're not saying don't review it, but it does make it, the history is nice to have, but still requires.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm gonna go check them off as high a priority, but it just in terms of how I think about things, like a recurring thing is sort of feels like in my mind, it starts out as a must-have, right? We gotta do sidewalks, we gotta do, now whether there's a balance left and all of that can be looked at, but there's sort of things that, we replace 30% of the computers. We do certain things, year over year that are just
Owned.
cloned.
I think
I just
we're,
would love to search that way.
yeah,
It would be useful.
okay. So just to follow that train of thought, if we're gonna search on recurring, what else would we want to search on? So, and then from that, we may or may not have to take other forks in the decision-making or discussion for decision-making tree. Do we want to be able to search on phased, supplemental, recurring overall in a gross sense, or are we? I'm just trying to think, because as we're having this discussion, I'm also thinking about how to manage this in the database. Is it field that shows up from text in a text box from a summary description or a comment from the department head? Is it a separate field that then we can, because it's a separate discrete parcel of data, it can be shown as in columns as such, or it can be sorted on, or it can be put into a report? I'm just trying to understand are there other elements we would want to sort on?
Stephen,
Howard, please.
I think that when the programmers put that functionality in there to provide for the sorting on any one, it will be there as functionality for any of these. So I don't think you need to distinguish it right now. You'll find that it'll be there.
Actually, it won't. So what happens there is you've got to design the database to do, AI's come a long way, but you have to design the database in a way that if it's a separate field, we have to let them know. Basically, we tell the database developer, we want to be able to sort on this. And what that means to them is not only can you sort it, you can report it. And what I mean by that is they can create a template. But wait 1 second. That's why I'm saying we need to make a determination of which of these we would like to sort on. Because that's all I'm trying to get to.
When you do this and they set up the location and the programming that they're doing, that you're filling in, and they have done an array to refer to that box with, is it an X or a Y in there? It can be an X or a Y, or it can be an A, B, C, D, E, F. It doesn't matter. The array is still pointing to the same location.
Right, but we're one step before that right now. We're doing the whiteboard design elements, and we're determining whether a department head types in the summary description with 100 or 5 other words, the word recurring, or is it a separate discrete field? So that's what I'm trying to determine now by asking, are there other elements that we want to sort on? Brooke has identified recurring. I'm looking for any others. Brooke,
Just had a light bulb go off in
Yeah,
my
please.
brain, right? Submittal date has the full 4-digit year. The code has a 2-digit year, right? So if I search -17, I get everything that has been submitted since, because I'm only seeing the ones that are in capital committee review, right?
Mhm.
So I'm seeing everything that's been copied over since 2017. Right, so in a sense, by knowing how to use
the
the
search,
existing data. And then I can if I search by a 4-digit year, I see when it was submitted.
but that doesn't address recurring. So what I'm trying to figure out is,
Right,
if we all determine recurring is worthwhile to sort on, are there other words or aspects of a request we want to be able to sort on?
Previously denied.
Previously denied. And Sue, how do you guys handle something that has been, how would you say, recommended to an out year? As opposed to just denied?
Oh, that's a good one too.
So that's a great question, Mr. Chair. What I do when you guys make that recommendation to an out year, or town admin makes that recommendation to an out. I go in and I manually change the start year date. And that automatically pushes it out to that particular year, whether it be 2026, 2027, but it will then automatically shift everything.
Okay,
So,
so then we don't
but
see it until.
Barry,
right,
and then
so,
Brooke.
yeah, so let me ask you a question. How deep does that search field run inside the entire system? Is it only just searching on just
Yeah.
basic pages, or is
It's
it?
searching discrete fields, so you could search.
Okay,
You could search, for instance, I mean, I don't know if they've set up the utility within the database, but you could set up a search that searches the summary field and it would search all the text in it, but it's not a clean search. And what I mean by a clean search is it's not a field that is applicable to a request such as recurring. And then you can search on just recurring that check, that, as Howard was saying, a 0 or a 1.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
I think what I'm saying to you though is the search engine robust enough? Just, let's work with this for a second. If I type in the word fire hydrant, it's gonna make any associations it possibly can with that. If it can do it on that level, just pick 2 arbitrary terms that we know exist.
So it doesn't actually do it on that level with our interface.
But pick,
So
what I want you to do is pick terms that don't exist on this master page. Let's go a little deeper into what's there.
well, I'm right with you and I'm a step ahead. I'm searching on a word I know is in here. And it's only given me one instance, but I know that we have more than one instance of
Okay, all
computer
right, I see.
in the
Okay, you and I are on
field.
the same page, all right. You and I are on the
So
same
what
page.
I'm trying to say is that, sorry, but
No, I understand what I.
yeah,
you-
the search
you
is
just-
only searching these particular,
Five fields that are
pieces of
populated.
data.
Yeah, exactly, all right,
and
so.
in
we're-
order, if we want to have a search, all I'm asking is, which other pieces of data would we like to have entered?
So I'm gonna go back to what Brooke was saying earlier, that I think that you need to come up with another data field.
Yeah,
It's
that's what
gonna
we're
have-
talking,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, no, I
Another
just,
column.
yeah, that's what we're talking about.
I just
And
didn't know if there was a quick shortcut.
no, I'm gonna go back to where we were 15 minutes ago. All I'm asking is, are there any words that you want to be able to search on? Such as recurring or
Yes.
denied or recommended out year, like, because we can't search on that unless we have the database company
Correct,
create the field and then someone
And fills it in.
checks the field as applicable and then it'll show up in the columns.
correct.
And then we can search on it. Does that
We don't use tabled too much, but maybe tabled.
table? No.
We don't.
I mean, well, what's
Get into
useful?
that.
What, I mean, recurring, I guess, could be useful, recommended to out year. I have a feeling like these, based on just what we've learned here today and what we can learn in a a practice run on the, Rory is, you know,
All right,
we know that just by typing in cap, I can sort this, all the requests to just the current year being reviewed by capital program.
Mhm.
If I want to add, and I only want fire, I can type in fire. If I only want sewer, I can type in sewer. So I think like that alone for people is probably going to be a huge help. I would like to think that the idea of doing this and then opening these up in different pages is going to have a lot of utility too. But, you know, because then you can go to here. Oh, this is in the print view, back to normal view. You can go to my Rory. So I'm just gonna show you this because you guys play with this at home because it's gonna inform what we do. I've created a master list for fire sewer. I've created a. Sorry. My OCD. I've got fire up. Now I have the request. I want to be able to see the whole thing. I'll open printer view in the new window.
Right.
And then I'll go to my Rory. And now I can look at this and I can go to the SIP request form, all of it in one place versus having to go through the tabs in the left margin here. And I can see that information as I'm going through and trying to recall the discussions we had. When I finish with it, I can close those out. I go back and I can do the next one. So I think that might be helpful. I'd ask you guys for homework to consider whether that is sufficient utility to address some of the topics we talked about today.
yeah,
And if it's not, then let's put them on the table. Because we've talked a lot about that kind of an aspect of it, the particular aspect of searching.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to try and get in today? Mindful of the time, it's
not
a little bit.
today, but I really think we need to hit into, the Rory system. Yeah,
Right, so that the valuation is a pet peeve of how the values are assigned.
Yeah.
I think of Howard and Barry. That will be a discussion that is gonna take some time. So that will be one, and it's also gonna be the heaviest part of modification of
Right.
the software. So what I want to do is I've highlighted that in the master list I have, but I want to save that for when we have time to just dig into
I
that.
agree, that's its own conversation.
Okay, and then the last thing I'll add, Christie, and then I'll
Yep.
give you the floor, is I think we should address definitions just prior to that, same sitting, because definitions inform the meaning of what we're trying to capture. And then that relates to how and why we're valuing them the way we are in the software. I'm just talking about discussion. I'm not talking, just trying to talk about
Yeah.
structuring discussion, future, please.
Will we have access to a glossary? Because as a new member,
Glossary.
having a glossary would be
Oh, yeah.
instrumental.
Easiest way to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one I want to tag on that was the idea we had is if you mouse over a field in my Rory on this sheet, a pop-up, there'd be a little pop-up and it would have the definition.
Oh,
And then, I mean, you can look at
live
it.
glossary,
and-
even better.
So that was one of the elements that we'd identified previously. We just never, I've got a list of probably 50 things we just haven't had a chance to get to, and I'm not suggesting we will. But so live glossary. And that will come in part as a result of our definitions discussion.
Yeah.
Please, Barry.
Christie, did you have something first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did, but I
No, I'm
have
sorry.
2 comments, but if you want, if on
No,
this.
go ahead, I can.
Um,
This is.
I apologize, sorry for getting here late. I know when I walked in, you guys was talking about scheduling and scheduled, and I didn't know if there was, do we have, like, are we all on board with the same definition of scheduled?
No,
No.
and that's why I
No,
use it
that's-
as an example.
That's where we're back to the.
Yeah, we really didn't have too much of a conversation on that.
Yeah, so we're gonna have that discussion when
Okay.
we discuss definitions, and I know that's.
It's already updated it, it's all.
Yeah, okay, because that would be,
Yeah.
I think things would be a lot clearer. And
More
it
consistent.
would allow the voting to be more reflective, I think. if we
Consistent.
all, yeah, consistent, if we all kind of were going on the same criteria of what that means.
Right.
And then I have another question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask Sue, if when we look up data or detail within Aurora, if there is very little data, how do we know if you've not received it from the department head as opposed to the data having not been entered yet?
Should never make it before since all the data is in.
Or when we get them, should everything have been entered?
So that's a
Yes.
good question as well. I'm actually changing things this year and I'm going to keep control of doing all the data entry myself. I'm going back to using the forms that they need to fill out and send them in. And if it is incomplete, it'll be returned to them. So you will not see any projects in here that do not have all the complete information.
Yay.
And then that would extend, just while we got you on the hot seat, Sue, to, whether we look at supplemental documents and we see nothing, or we see only one in the future, we're gonna know this is Sue stamped approved. Maybe not in terms of the numbers, but in terms of you've reviewed it and it's all relevant, so on and so forth. Okay.
I have one,
Christie, please.
just on that, Sue.
And then
A lot of times we see, we get requests for equipment that we don't know what it is. It would be nice if there was some sort of just guidance to maybe offer a, photo or something. Like sometimes you have like small packer truck or vacuum truck or,
Telehandler.
there's something in it, yeah. It would just be nice to sort of have within the detail, some sort of image.
Yeah, like a tear sheet,
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
that, you know, here's the piece of something, your asset you're purchasing, and this is
Yeah.
a very brief description on it. Not something, Sue, I don't think we're looking for you to create something, but
Yes.
maybe the department head went to the website for telehandlers and he just downloaded a picture of one or something along those lines. And it's just specialized equipment.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we all got what a dump truck is, so we're good on
Or
that.
a PC.
Oh,
But so, yeah,
Barry, you good?
yeah, I'm good.
Barry.
So that brings me to, would the system be able to handle an internal hyperlink? So in other words, I want a dump truck, I want a ladder truck. Let the department head just put in the appropriate hyperlink so that when I'm looking at this, like, oh, I can just click on that and go to see what they're looking at.
Or that. But when there's nothing there, you're just like,
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
so Sue,
and that may be the fastest way to resolve it without getting data intensive.
or that.
and that, okay, so that will be one that could be a really good idea. I'm not sure how it would be shown in the database that reports to us, because putting Earls in a report involves another level, because you're not, it's not like you're printing to a PDF and you have
Right.
the link active. But this is one I want to talk, when I speak to Brian, I want to get
Yeah,
input on,
so
as Earl URL.
so if I can have a minute when you're done.
Yeah, I stopped talking like 10 seconds ago.
I know, but I want to give you, I'm watching you write things down and I know.
No, you're good, you're good, you're good.
Okay, so. Let me just wait till Brooke gets back.
Hey, you guys, Barry would like the floor and he wants it swept clean, so everybody. Go ahead, come on.
to eat crumbs off of
Light bulb went off in Barry's head, go.
Okay, oh my God, yeah. As soon as the light bulb even worked. I'm gonna say to you right now, for anyone coming in doing this for their first year or two, the learning curve on using this is intensive. It really is. Just sitting with you today. In the course of less than an hour, I learned some new tricks that I never even entertained.
Hmm.
So the three things that I really think we need to focus on here are one, a lexicon.
Mhm.
So we understand so we're on common ground for what all these terms mean. The second thing which will come into play is the whole scoring mechanism, and that brings us back to the Rory thing. And the third thing is what can we do with searches that we implement in the system? Because those are really, I think on a macro view, those are the biggest things that you need to be able to maneuver and manipulate to
So
make this a meaningful exercise.
if we had to pick three, I'm gonna jump in. I would say, yes, yeah, we are identifying, well, there's four. I think there's like,
Go ahead.
general cleanup.
Yeah.
Items that just come up that we can answer and we can address simply. Matters we can address in discussion, in a group, discussing these topics that people can then walk away from and be enriched as to their understanding of how to use the software, or how to understand it, or how to process ROAR requests. Those, I think, that's one category. That's just gonna be an organic aspect of what we're doing. The other is scoring, which will be towards the end,
Yep.
because we need to do you say lexicon, we say, someone said glossary, someone said live glossary.
Same idea.
That's good. That then will come scoring. Scoring will also come after an important element, which I think is more important than super enhanced search capabilities. And the reason I say it's more important than super enhanced search capabilities is because there's a limited amount that we can accomplish by searching on specific data points. Like I could
Yeah.
look up telehandler and find one, or I could look up the department head says this is urgent. We're not gonna get, this isn't a rich data set, I guess is what I'm saying. So there will be a limitation on the benefits of search capabilities if they aren't targeting essential aspects of how we work with the software. I think that they would be in the version 4.0, because the other aspect of what we need to be doing is looking at expanded criteria and reorganization of categories. And that's a huge one. And then that is gonna inform, I think that will be before definitions, and then scoring will come last, because scoring is gonna relate to both of the two precursor steps. Does that?
But
Okay.
the idea of developing a glossary and doing I just lost that train of thought. But as you're talking about being able to score or search, somehow at the same time, you're also developing that glossary.
Yeah, it's gonna have
Because
to be.
that, they almost have to go with each other.
You're reading my notes here. It has to be in sequence, and part of it's sequential, but it's gonna be iterative.
Right, I get it.
Iterative.
Yeah.
To Christie's point, we should be paying close attention to every item, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, you gotta open up and read all the detail about every item to
Yeah.
really make an
Correct,
informed
of course.
decision.
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
So,
Yeah, and if it's, well, two things, if you're not doing it, then you cut yourself short, but if it's not there, it doesn't help.
and realize that the intensity of all those data fields, it's not just for our edification. It really is a number of different people looking at this thing, having to cull out pieces of information that for them are important, but for us may have absolutely no meaning. It's just something to consider as well.
There's another element that I think is really important, given where we are in perhaps the development of town governance. And this is a big undertaking, that we're doing.
Go ahead.
And it's not, I'm not speaking about me personally, I'm speaking about overall.
Yeah.
And if we, the reason I bring this up is my understanding is that one of the original articles for a town council versus our town council legal advice was the omission of capital program committee. Now, in the wisdom of the voters, if they decide to do that, that's fine. I'm not, but what I want to do is get a read from the committee that is going to be making recommendations of whether they're patterning, they believe, if they may not know at this point, and Jill's on the group, they may not know at this point, but it would be the effort we're putting in is really a 5-year development. This is like stage 2 of a 5-year development plan. We did stage 1, which was the infrastructure. We validated the architecture, it's operational, it's functioning. Now we're doing, I think these would be called, many of these essential enhancements.
Mhm.
The next phase of maybe it's not 5 years, but depending on how much time volunteers have and how much money finance department has to input into it, I'm saying 5-year plans. The next phase would be, like super fine tuning type things.
Yeah.
If we're doing this major enhancement, I personally am not thrilled with the idea that we didn't even ask, like, if they have a consensus view on whether their recommendation will pattern after the prior one. Because if it goes to town meeting and capital program isn't recommended to be continued, this is effort for naught. I mean, we're gonna implement it. No, please.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Whether it's the capital program committee utilizing this software or some other group of people,
But
the process will exist.
But this is
It has
where
to
I take a
exist.
little bit of exception, because you don't want to be the person who trains your replacement. It's just not, it doesn't sit well. And if I'm gonna do this as a matter of goodwill and community contribution, I have no problem with that. But I want to know what's coming down the pike. Because I would be approaching this completely different if this was gonna be 9 brand new people coming in and using this software. Think about you two who came in.
Yeah.
It's a totally different animal. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile to endeavor. I'm saying it's worthwhile to endeavor, but knowing there is potential change on the horizon in relatively near term, it's also worth knowing what we're designing for. Because we're designing a solution for people who are fairly well accustomed to the software, people who are new coming in. And also we're designing a fairly robust solution around priorities that a town council may not have the same priorities. They will have they're empowered to establish their own priorities. So if we're making changes and it seems like capital program isn't in the rosy future of Nantucket, I don't have an issue with that if that's what the voters want. My concern is we're not developing a system that with each iteration becomes more cast in concrete. And you can't then scale it or modify it because it's so established in terms of, well, everything revolves around the criteria in the RORI. So take it from there, and the percentages and the valuations, and then how we're developing our next steps. So I'm just trying to suggest that if this is something for potentially someone else, then we need to have that in mind when we're investing time into this, because we might be investing time into things that aren't necessarily going to be beneficial, because it solidifies a particular way of thought and a particular way of process. Barry.
I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you to a certain extent, because the thing is that if you've got, let's say it just gets turned over to the finance department, beautiful, end of conversation at this point. Anything else brings up way too many variables about who is gonna be touchstoning this thing. And I think that by just kind of saying, we don't know what's gonna happen, let's just put it all aside for now, is a great mistake.
I didn't
They will
suggest
get-
that.
Okay, but
Let's be clear.
no,
I don't want you to
okay,
put
I'm
words in
not,
my
I'm
mouth.
not, no, I'm
Okay.
trying to get to a point though, nonetheless. Okay? That anything short of a finance department will be a well-meaning group of individuals who will have to go from back to square one and design up.
No,
No?
no.
So who else would it be besides the finance department that you envision in the
But-
future here?
Well, finance department, there's nothing that suggests finance department needs to utilize this software. They can, they make decisions based upon other variables.
Sure.
We are, as will a town council. A town council is an elected political position. We are citizen advisors.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this information with weighting through the DOR compact, which is designed for capital program review by appointed citizens. If a I don't know what a town council will do. They would be the party who would be making the decision. All I'm saying is it would be beneficial if you know that you are very likely going to be moving out, or there's an intention that you'll be moving out of your house, you don't design a house to live in for 2 years. If you're doing it, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. At least you want to understand that, okay, everybody needs a kitchen, everybody needs bathrooms, everyone needs certain elements, but there are other elements you don't want to bake into the design, because once they're done, it's for a relatively short period without a return on them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess, when you do meet with Brian, it'd be interesting to know if, say, this board was not here and a whole new one came in tomorrow,
Yeah,
would they still facilitate the program?
yeah, and that's all I was suggesting, is we
Yeah.
talk to them and
Yeah.
find out, and because that will flavor how I approach this in terms of what else I might suggest to benefit them, not to not do it. I mean, I'm not looking for an excuse to shelve this.
It's also helpful, I mean, the end result is having a good, thorough, full of data report for
Yeah.
the bodies that are why we're doing it.
Yeah.
No
question, which is what we've developed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is, I believe, one of the elements is the forward-looking utility of the changes we're making.
Can I
Yeah, please, Brooke.
add a thought? If you guys have figured out how to do this, or how, so I go in, I have completed a Rory for an item. I'd love to be able to search just for the ones that I haven't completed. So I don't have to go into them to find out whether I did them or not.
Or if I may add, or on just initial, as you scroll through them, that you can see, that if there is a field that is something that you can input, you put yourself a check mark, so you can just scroll and you know it.
Sort of like when
Or-
I do a online grant application for Cape Cod 5, it allows me to save my progress.
All right.
So it would be sort of like in progress, complete, because originally I thought we had a submit button, which we don't, I don't think. I think you did, but we don't.
Just to say.
Yeah, so we're looking for,
So are all the fields complete?
right,
That's
So,
all, so
tell-
I can search, instead of Sue
So
having to
finance-
do that
yeah.
search and email us a list of what we haven't
And
finished.
they've been doing that,
They do that.
Sue? Did you?
Sue does that, but
yes.
I'd love to be able to search.
I'm
it.
sorry, did I see your hand?
Nope.
No, okay, so I mean, basically what you're looking for is, it makes total sense, is the ability to, I usually just print mine to a PDF and I name it, and I have them in a folder, but it would be much simpler and easier to be able to sort on the Rory's page
So,
here to determine whether something is not started, in process, completed. So basically a status sort, right?
Yeah, that would be a huge help.
so this is just paper and pencil, but every department head meeting we have, Sue sends out the information for that meeting. And we get the list of items. I staple them all together and I highlight what I've done. It's kind of paper and pencil, but
Yeah,
it allows me to have it's always nice to have a one-stop sort of visual, a big picture visual. And that's sort of what that is for me.
Yeah.
I gotta do a little work, but,
Well, what I found is
But
there
it's
were
just-
times when I had one field missing and I would have checked it off on my list, thinking it was done, but it
Well-
wasn't.
Late requests get added, requests get removed. So sometimes
Sure.
it changes from the paper report to what's actually there.
Easy.
And if I'm on the road and I'm logged, I really want it to be all online, not in a piece of
Yeah,
paper.
yeah,
have
I
to
get
put
it, I
in
get
a
it.
folder and carry
Right.
with me if I'm traveling.
Well, it definitely would be a convenience to be able to have a status sort for individual member breweries.
Yeah.
So we'll add that to the list and see if we can get that done,
See if it's
because
doable.
I think between the other the search, techniques we've discussed today and being able to determine whether something is complete or not complete. I mean, even complete but started, or complete, not complete but started, or, default is gonna be that it's not started yet, so we'll work on that one too.
Yeah.
Okay, it is 4:30 now. Do you guys want to keep going, or we want to wrap up?
I gotta get going.
Yeah, gotta wrap.
A little bit.
All right.
All right,
But happy to-
I think call it a day.
Yeah.
that was good though.
Yeah, it's good. Spirited discussion. Counting stuff. I love that. This lights my fire. Okay, so let's see, with that, we are at 4:33 and take a motion. Next date of next meeting is the 25th at 3 PM, hybrid. And with that, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
PJ on your motion.
Aye.
Christie,
Bye.
Brooke,
Bye.
Barry,
Aye.
Howard.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jill? She has her volume off. We're gonna take that as a yes. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You said the 25th at 3.